As a videographer, this here is one of the reasons why I'm interested in these portable COB lights. Now, on this shoot, I decided to gamble a bit and leave all my regular lights at home and only bring the Ninja 200 from Weeylight. Hi there, in this video we are looking at the Ninja 200 from Weeylight. Now, this review is going to be based on my experience using this light on a commercial shoot and as a key light here in the studio. Now, for transparency, Weeylight did send this light out to me to be reviewed, but that won't make the light perform any better or worse on the shoot that I did or here in my studio. The Ninja 200 is a compact 60-watt bi-color light with a temperature range from 2800 all the way up to 8500 Kelvin. The TLCI and CRI ratings are, according to Weeylight, greater than 95. The base model comes with a light, a tiny reflector, and a padded carrying case. And just to give you an idea of how compact this light is and portable, here's the case that comes with one of my Godox lights. I believe this here is the Godox VL150, and this little guy here is the case you get with the Ninja 200. See if I can get this in frame here. So when it comes to portability, even if the output isn't exactly the same between these two lights, the Ninja 200 is gonna be way more pleasant for you to lug around to different shoots. Now, let me just get these out of the way here. So despite the case being quite small and compact in itself, there's actually some room in there for additional accessories. So if you do end up getting one of these, I do recommend that you get one of these as well. This here is a Bowens mount adapter, and it will basically allow you to mount your standard Bowens modifiers onto this light, because these compact COB lights typically have a smaller mount than your standard Bowens. I've used the adapter with my 35-inch Octabox, and I didn't notice any drooping from the yoke or any instability in the mount itself, despite it being made entirely out of plastic, apart from the umbrella holder here, which actually is metal. Now, let's look at some of the pictures from the shoot that I did with the Ninja. On this shot, the light is placed frame left, and the idea here is to see if I could kind of extend and wrap some of the natural light coming from the windows around the face of our subject. There's also some tungsten spotlights that I left on, giving us a nice interior vibe. And on this side of the frame, there's a tube light at, I think I had it at like 20% or something, just to bring up the levels of this corner a tiny bit. But that's pretty much it for this setup. Sadly, I won't be able to show you any moving pictures from this project, but I hope these frame grabs will give you a good idea of how the light performs. So for this shot here, we still have the light on the left side of the frame because these two people are having a conversation. It's just giving our subject a light kiss of light, just to bring out a bit more detail and shape in the face. And this is pretty much what it looked like straight out of camera. I know we're talking about using a 60-watt light for a commercial shoot, but I just want to say that 60 watts isn't super bright, so I wouldn't recommend you to aim at getting a bunch of 60-watt lights and do commercial shoots, because you will run into some issues sooner or later. We won't be able to control or compete with the sun or what have you. For this shoot, I knew that I had some pretty decent natural light coming from the windows, and we had a nice overcast day, so the light coming from the windows was nice and soft. And this video that we shot was about death and destruction, so I knew I could make it work even if I weren't using a lot of light. So I actually think I ended up using the light at about 70% for a lot of these shots. Not saying you can't use 60-watt lights for a commercial shoot. I just think that if you're aspiring to become a videographer and do commercial gigs, get something with at least twice the amount of output for key lights and that kind of stuff. Well, end of the boring lecture. Now, are you wondering how this light can be on without being plugged in or having the battery attachment here? Well, here's how and why. Another reason for this is that you may run into some issues with sound using this light, depending on what kind of microphone you're using. So before we start complaining too much about the fan noise of this light, I went ahead and did a tiny little test because a lot of you are using dynamic mics and some of you are using condenser mics like this one up here. And condenser mics are typically more sensitive and will pick up a bit more from the environment. So for the first test, we're going to use this microphone here. This is the Shure Beta 58, which is kind of the closest microphone I have to the Shure SM7. So this is a dynamic microphone and they're typically not super sensitive to sounds from the surroundings. So here we go. Okay, so now we've got the light turned on here in the background and I'm talking into the Shure Beta 58, which is a dynamic microphone very similar to the SM7. And let's listen and see if we can hear the fan noise in the background. Very sensitive microphone. And just to add to the test we just watched, on the shoot I used a lavalier microphone and that lav didn't pick up any fan noise either. So a dynamic microphone or a lavalier is usually the best option if you're dealing with a noisy environment or a noisy light. Now, that said, you can actually turn the fan all the way off on this light if you need to do like a super quiet take or something. In the studio here, I did a test where I ran the light for about 40 minutes on 57%. And don't ask me how I ended up on 57%, but by the end of those 40 minutes, the light was definitely warm to the touch, but not alarmingly hot. And this will obviously vary depending on the ambient temperature and all that. But it's an option. You can make it work for shorter periods of time without any noise whatsoever. Okay, so while editing this video, I discovered that Weeylight have removed the option to completely turn off the fan in their latest firmware. So in user forum, I found this response about the fan and the firmware. The products have been optimized and the fan cannot be turned off to prevent product from being damaged by excessive. So totally understand why Weeylight did this. And I'm not sure about the status of the firmware and the units that are being shipped out. The one I have still have the feature to turn off the fan, but I'm kind of curious and maybe I'll go ahead and update the firmware to see if they fixed the fan and if they fixed another issue that we'll talk about later in this video. Okay, back to the main video. Controlling the light can be done here on the back with a dial and buttons, or you can go ahead and use the amazing Weeylight app, which is actually one of the better lighting apps that I've used. Or if you're one of those people that don't like to use apps, there's also a traditional remote available. And speaking of the back, there's also a tiny USB-C port here, which can be used for things like firmware upgrades, which we'll get to in a minute. I believe the Ninja 200 is kind of the first light of its kind within the Weeylight lineup, and they did a pretty good job. I'm not as impressed, to be honest, with this light as I've been with some of the other lights from Weeylight that I've tried and even reviewed on this channel. I do like the super low weight. It's only about 1 kilo or roughly 2 pounds. And the form factor is also very attractive, and it's also very easy to bring with you. It's very portable and all that. I don't like the fan noise, which we talked about in this video, that may or may not become a problem for you, especially if you're planning on using this light as a key light placed somewhat close to a microphone. Another thing that comes to mind is the dimming curve of this light. Take a look at this. This here is the light at just 1%. Now, I wish that 1% wasn't quite as bright as this, but hopefully this is something that Weeylight can address with firmware in the future. After all, they've given us a nice USB-C port for that kind of stuff. In the meanwhile, I will continue to bring the Weeylight out with me on different shoots to be used as rim light or for ambient lighting. After all, it's a bi-color light, so we can get that nice separation with skin tones if we light up a background with a colder temperature and all that. And I will also keep my eyes peeled for the Ninja Mark II, which hopefully will have a silent fan and slightly better TLCI and CRI ratings, just to give the other brands within this niche slightly stiffer competition. Well, that's gotta be it for this one. I want to thank you for watching, and if you want to see more videos about lights and lighting, maybe take a look at this one, or if you want to see something completely different, take a look at this one. Okay, bye! Some say it's an acquired taste. I think it's a good taste. Cheers.